There's this line that you hear sometimes, that this is the best time in history to be alive. It shows up in TED Talks, in op-eds, in global development reports. And 5 years ago, the New York Times published an article titled, "Why 2019 was the best year in human history." On paper, it makes sense. Fewer people are living in extreme poverty, more children are going to school, vaccines are reaching places they never used to. But whenever I hear the phrase, "the best time in history," I find myself pausing, not because I think it's wrong, but because I think it's incomplete. It feels a bit like reading the conclusions of a progress report where all the numbers look great, but you never actually look at the graphs within. Part 1, The Case for Optimism. Nicholas Kristof, the author of that op-ed, isn't naive. He has spent decades reporting from war zones and refugee camps. He has seen real suffering, and still his message is, look how far we've come. Extreme poverty has dropped from 42% in the early 1980s to less than 10%. Hundreds of thousands of people will gain access to electricity, clean water, and education every single day. And he's right in a statistical sense. These are real gains, real lives changed. And maybe that deserves acknowledgement, but it still feels off to me, like we're celebrating too soon. It reminds me a bit of marathons. You will have all of these incredible athletes with astonishing finish times. But if you only look at those with numbers beside their names, you will miss the DNFs. So who are the DNFs of the global development world? Part 2, the uneven story. This discomfort that I feel, that itch beneath the skin, is what Jason Hickel tries to name. He's an anthropologist who's been asking for years, what if we are not measuring poverty correctly? What if the line we use to define extreme poverty, currently $2.15 a day, isn't a sign of success, but rather a global minimum wage for survival? He suggests a higher bar, not just for food and shelter, but to include dignity to choose your own path. And when you raise the bar, the numbers shift. Suddenly, billions are still in poverty. The curve doesn't look like progress anymore. It looks like stagnation. But Hickel goes further. He asks why we call it progress when someone gains access to a mosquito net, but a national crisis when someone in the US loses their health insurance. Why do we cheer for basic survival in the global South, yet expect thriving lifestyles in the global North? It's not just about numbers. It's about which lives we expect to flourish and which we're content to see just improve. Part 3, systems, sensors, and false positives. This is where the engineer in me starts twitching, because it's a classic example of a biased system. You set your sensors in places that are easy to reach, and you define your benchmarks based on what's convenient to measure. You optimize toward outputs that look good in reports, and what you get is false confidence. I've seen this in device design. A device can pass all of the tests, but fail in a rural clinic because no one asked how it would be cleaned or stored or trained on or understood. We call it design for use, which is a step above designing for function. And maybe we need to start asking the same thing of development. Not did it improve a number, but did it restore agency? Did it reduce dependency? Did it build toward justice? Part 4, 2 blueprints, 1 tension. Here's the thing. They're both telling the truth, just different sides of it. Kristof is looking at the trajectory, and Hickel is looking at the terms. Kristof says we're lifting people up, and Hickel says from where to where, and why do they need lifting in the first place? To me, it feels a bit like the difference between treating an illness and redesigning the system. One is just giving medication, and the other is asking why people are getting sick in the first place. Part 5, what do we call progress? I think the real question here is, what kind of world are we trying to build? One where survival is enough, or one where everyone gets the chance to thrive? Are we measuring development by the gifts that we give, or by the structures that we change? Is a paved road in a village a win if the road mostly exists for us to extract more resources from this country? Hickel writes that the fight is not against poverty, but against the structures that produce it. I keep thinking about that, because as long as we define success by output and not justice, we risk creating systems that look like progress, but reproduce the same imbalance that they claim to fix. In conclusion, progress is not a graph. It's a question. Who gets to define it? Who benefits from it? And who was left out of the story? If we want to build a world that's truly better, maybe we don't just need better data. Maybe we need a better imagination. One that listens more, one that designs slower, and one that refuses to mistake movement for justice.